Welcome to the Scandinavian Mind podcast, our show about the intersection of lifestyle and technology, where we talk about the current trends and events within business, tech, fashion, design, culture, and more, from the Nordic perspective of our team of editors and contributors. Today on the program, Fashion Weeks are on with Copenhagen Fashion Week that is taking place this week. We look at what digital fashion weeks might look like. We also read up on what analyst Matt Klein thinks are the most important meta trends for 2022. And lastly, we are joined later in the program by our special guest, Karolina Lisslö Gylfe, Secretary General of Ekomodernisterna, who's going to talk about why nuclear energy is important. That's going to be interesting. I'm Konrad Olsson, Editor-in-Chief and founder of Scandinavian Mind, and I'm joined, as always, by my dear colleagues, Roland, Philippe, Kretzschmar, Editor-at-Large, and our junior editor, Erik, Sedin. Morning, guys.
Morning.
Morning.
All right. So I think we're going to do a kind of a bigger story on Copenhagen Fashion Week next week when we sort of had time to sort it all out. I can just note that, just in time for Fashion Week, Denmark lifted all restrictions, and I've been viewing all kinds of images and reports and Instagram stories from very, very crowded dinner parties down at the center of Copenhagen, from Apollo Bar, one of the most classic sort of after parties. People are packed. They are packed. I think the Danes have been looking forward to this for a long time.
Yeah, and we joked about how Fashion Week has like a stronghold of the Prime Minister. So like for Fashion Week, they have to go, the restrictions.
What is your FOMO scale here, Konrad, looking at all the pictures on Instagram from Apollo Bar?
I have to say, this is the first time, or maybe last year, of course, but, spending January not traveling to any fashion week, not going to Italy like I used to, you kind of get used to being at home and you kind of get comfortable in it. So I kind of feel good not traveling. But when I see these photos, absolutely, I would love to be there, meet people, hang out. I think there was some kind of picture on, was it some of the founders of Shownotes, that the after party was crashed by the police. So it seems like people are really into, they really want to get out there and party, and are doing so in a heavy fashion. Anyways, there's been quite a lot happening during Copenhagen Fashion Week. A lot of shows, more than I ever expected. Actually, a lot of creativity. I think it's looking very expressive. We had one story up this week from the winner of the Designers Nest Award, the MA graduate of Aalto University, Levi Ikkeheimo. Sorry about my pronunciation. Levi Ikkeheimo, Rintaro Idino, and Fredrik Taus are the recipients of the Nordic Fashion Prize. And that looks really awesome. There's also Jade Copper and a bunch of other designers that I'm really looking forward to. We might dive into that next week. Let's take a look at another story that we've been reporting on this week. Erik, you can tell me more about this, but Decentraland have announced that they're launching a virtual fashion week later this year in March. What's happening here?
Like you said, Copenhagen Fashion Week just finished, and Stockholm Fashion Week is coming up next week. We posted a story about how Decentraland will host the first fashion week in the metaverse, which of course there are all these buzzwords, and I just wanted to kind of debone this and like look at what it really means, because we've seen fashion collaborations, we've seen fashion shows on digital platforms, but this is like the first fashion week. And, some things are kind of worrying me here, because they're doing this fashion week officially. Decentraland has officially gone out and say that this is taking place in March, in a month, with UNXD. I don't know if you guys heard of UNXD.
That was the first time I read about it, but please explain to the listeners.
They're not huge. Like, they've done one official Dolce & Gabbana NFT digital and physical clothing drop, which was kind of written about, but they're not very big. They call themselves a luxury marketplace for digital goods, so art and digital fashion. Not really that big. They have 2,000 followers on Instagram. If you compare it to like Tribute Brand or Dematerialized or Dress X, far better. Probably for like such a established platform like Decentraland, they should have went for like a bigger marketplace, if you ask me. So that's like my first kind of concern about this. It's supposed to be a whole week, 4 days,
right,
with fashion shows, catwalks, pop-ups, shops, after parties. So 4 whole days, and that's kind of my first concern. How UNXD are supposed to be this great, like they're supposed to have this pull to Decentraland, which I'm not so sure they will. We'll see. The thing is, this Fashion Week is also Decentraland has went out and said that the fashion pieces on show is only for the avatars. So it's not like you can buy like a physical twin or you can buy them for another platform. So it's a Fashion Week only for Decentraland. And for me, like another thing I'm a bit not worried about, but that I'm kind of flabbergasted about is how many people do you think? I'm going to ask you now. It's like a little quiz here. How many people do you think are on Decentraland?
Great question. That's a great question. I have no idea.
Because Decentraland, they're supposed to be this, the most established metaverse platform, right?
Yeah.
I mean, average per month.
Yeah.
I don't know.
20,000?
100,000?
What was that? 20,000 and 200?
No, a couple of 100,000, I would say. Yeah.
Okay, we're far.
That's good. I'm a bit. I think Ron might have Googled this before because that was very close. It's 300,000 actually.
Okay.
Which is more than you said, Konrad, 20,000. But it's pretty good. But
I'm lowballing it.
Yeah, that's good. But it's a lot. But if you compare it to these gaming platforms, it's peanuts. It's nothing. Like for example, Roblox, they have 200 million. Minecraft, that's kind of like old now, 141 million monthly users.
What about Fortnite?
Fortnite, 80 million.
Yeah.
So,
no, but I think you're onto something here, and this is where we will see the washout of the year. I mean, now when the pandemic is kind of moving into endemic phase and restrictions are lifted globally, people want to go out into the physical world again. There's going to be a backlash, let's say, on everything related to metaverse. I think we're going to see a lot of these platforms basically, struggling. But I think it's healthy, right? We need these kind of washouts now and again. And I think that's where maybe, Meta, old Facebook, they have an advantage, right? They have like 1 billion plus users monthly. I think Apple, they acknowledged this week they're investing into the metaverse. Those big platform players are going to win. And I think maybe this is not the time to discuss this, some other episode maybe, but the whole idea of Web3's decentralization, I'm starting now to see the patterns where actually all the big players are going to consolidate and own everything in this decentralized world. So I'm not so sure about decentralization anymore.
I know, it's kind of like a catch-22.
Yeah, we should definitely talk about that and maybe find someone to talk to about it with. But just one comment on sort of the Fashion Week term here, because having been in the world of fashion for quite some time, the term Fashion Week is kind of this weird terms that anyone can kind of claim, but it sounds really official. So it's kind of easy to just claim we're doing the Fashion Week. If no one has claimed the first digital Fashion Week, it's very easy to claim we're doing the first digital Fashion Week. We know it just by looking at the Scandinavian Fashion Weeks, how the organizers behind them are always changing, and people are sort of claiming this concept, and it's really just an event. It's really just collecting people, showing a fashion in various ways, trying to find momentum in sort of the culture around it. So we'll see what happens here. I thought it was fascinating that they're doing it. I also think it's going to take a while until we see sort of the merge between physical fashion weeks, which we're seeing right now in Copenhagen, that people are really longing for the physical experience, and these digital fashion weeks. And I think perhaps this is a theme we can explore when we are now putting together our next print issue, which have a huge special on digital fashion, because I think, if anything, the need for a digital fashion week is probably, we need to see the emergence of more digital direct to avatar, more like digital fashion brands. Yes. So I think it's an interesting concept to look at. I don't think one should, overestimate what impact this will have.
Yeah, and I'm a bit worried that this Fashion Week, like the first official Fashion Week, will just end up as a YouTube clip, because no one really went there, and it's just going to be like, oh, look at this. And that's what I think, that's what I mentioned Roblox and all these places before, because they done these, they have like UGC content, user-generated content, where the players actually make fashion, and those are like sold in millions of copies. And I think a Fashion Week for the users, where they, let's say Decentraland makes like an official Fashion Week, but why do they need these like IRL. Like, I don't know. They don't need these like outside second parties. I don't think. I think the users should be in charge here.
That's the ultimate test, right, of the metaverse. Will it actually be interaction? Will digital things be sold? Or will it end up as a YouTube clip that no one watches? All right, moving on. This week, Matt Klein announced his meta trending trends for 2022. Roland, I know this is something you keep a close eye on. What is this and why should we pay attention to it?
Well, I think we're all a bit lazy, right? So every year there are tons of trend reports published. I usually wait for end of Jan, early Feb, because that's when Matt Klein basically has synthesized 40 plus trend reports, Fjord, Trend Watching, Accenture, Sparks and Honey, Deloitte, the list goes on. All the major trend reports, he synthesizes all the 500 plus trends and basically ranks them the 14 most frequently reported cultural trends. So it's aggregating. It's nice. It saves me a lot of time. And let's not go through maybe the 14 aggregated trends, but let's aim at the top 5. Right, so number 1.
Let me just get this straight before we move on.
Yeah.
You've had the role of editor-at-large for future and digitization, and you're not just now revealing this is your source material? This is how you do it?
Of course. I know, maybe I shouldn't do this. No, but listen, I think there are a lot of shortcuts in life. Let's give our readers the possibility to save some time as well. Anyways, the major trend that you see everywhere is eco everything. Not a surprise, right? So sustainability is embedded everywhere. But we want action, but delivery now. Some of the keywords that he has seen is greenwashing, compromises, buy for life, circular, zero impacts. That's kind of the aggregating words coming out. All the major trend reports have something about eco. The second major trend is digital default. Comes as no surprise. We talk about it every week. So life moves online, and there's this kind of blurring between in real life and online world. There's some keywords: phygital, metaverse, virtual reality, gaming, avatar. The third one is interesting. This is something that maybe could be a surprise. So that's everything related to kind of some sort of mind expanding type of produce. It could be magic mushrooms. It could be any other psilocybin type of ingredients. So, tune in, drop out, slow down, how can you expand your mind with other natural resources or chemical resources? But that's something that is trending for a couple of years now, especially the use of psychedelics for mental health issues. It's been approved in the US to be used now in limited testing environments, etc. So I think psychedelics are back, basically. The fourth major trend is radical inclusivity. So, gender neuro, accessible, income fluid, all of these words buzzing around, but basically radical inclusivity, meaning that, full on diversity, equity, belonging, integration. We in the Nordics are pretty used to this, but globally speaking, this is booming. Finally, I would say. And then the fifth major trend is, I would say, humor. So some sort of purposeless fun. And I think maybe this is actually a consequence of the pandemic. We've been bored to death for the past 2 years. So humor is back. We need a good laugh. So, in short, if you want to save some time, read up on Matt Klein's meta-analysis of 40 plus different trend reports. He has aggregated 500 different trends. You find him on Medium. Just Google it.
I will include the link, of course. But let me ask you then, is there any of these trends that you think is particularly interesting and caught your mind that we should explore in further episodes? What has sort of been roaming around in your mind after reading this?
Well, I think basically it is maybe a larger discussion about, are trend reports dead? It's like everything is trendy if you think about it. Yeah. If you actually look through the trend reports, and all these 500 plus different trends, because obviously I'm reading also those reports, so not only Matt Klein's meta-analysis. I mean, everything is listed. So that is a bit my problem with the trend reports, that it is maybe more kind of a barometer of what is happening right now, what is written about in media or in blog posts or talked about in podcasts right now, but it's maybe not, let's say, a future prediction. There you need to start to dig deeper. So I would say, if you need to have good conversations about what's trending right now in life, in the world, in society, read the trend reports. It gives you some sort of barometer. But if you want to use it to predict the future, I wouldn't use that.
Well, it's my experience that sort of trend reports are like forward-looking trend reports are more state of things than the future of things, because you're actually listing things that are happening right now instead of sort of predicting things that will happen. Exactly.
And if you think about those, let's say, futurists that have been the most successful at predicting the future, Ray Kurzweil and others, I mean, they don't spend their time writing trend reports with glossy images, and they actually spend time thinking hard on problem solving, and I think it requires a lot of true effort, of true analytics. Maybe you need to expand it with also some machine learning capabilities at this stage in order to really try to predict the future. That's hard work, let's say. But if you want to have a good read, have some fun, use it for kind of your yearly planning at your marketing firm or whatever. I mean, then it's a good source of inspiration.
Wonderful. Yeah. Usually trend reports are really kind of creative when it comes to language, because what these sort of trend reports need to do is invent or try to nail down or define these trends, and usually have some fun headlines and fun ways of calling things in new ways. Were there some takeaways there? I mean, the new buzzwords roaming around?
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at the way he has kind of aggregated this, right? So if we take this fifth trend around humor, I mean, he it's playfulness, playtale, playful pivots, radical optimism, unbounded optimism, prescribing happiness, etc., etc. I mean, the list goes on. Extertainment, absurdist makeovers. I mean, that's fun in itself, actually, just reading up on these different keywords and the way they package all these trends, right?
That's fun. And just a quick comment, because last week we had Andrew Tuck, editor-in-chief of Monocle, on the show, and their latest cover the latest issue is all about humor. So maybe we are onto something here. All right, that was Matt Klein's Meta Trending Trends for 2022. You'll find everything in our show notes and in the email that we send out every week about this podcast. All right, we are now joined by our special guest, Karolina Lisslö Gylfe, Secretary General of Ekomodernisterna, a non-profit organization that has a tech-optimistic view on how to solve our most important problems. Karolina, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Was that a good description of you guys? Because tech-optimistic, is that a good description of what you do?
I would say that that's definitely what we do, and I mean, tech is the solution to so many of our critical problems, and I truly believe that tech is the answer of pretty much everything. So yes.
Wonderful. Let's dive into it from there. Let's just pick a hot topic right away. One of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you is there has been so much buzz around nuclear energy being kind of like a solution to greenhouse gas emissions, sustainability. We have some really notable tech personalities like Bill Gates coming out in favor of a nuclear. Let's dive into this hot topic right away. What's your take on this, and why is this important?
Well, I mean, first of all, nuclear is like the greatest source of energy, of clean energy that we have at the moment. We can provide pretty much energy for the whole world in a very small area. So nuclear is not just tech, it's also sort of a great source of energy that you can create on a minimal area. So you could actually build nuclear very space effective if you want to.
Right.
So I would say that people tend the best about nuclear is pretty much if it's safe or not. If you listen to the science, which is also one of the very important part of the eco-modernists, we always sort of rely on science in our take on everything. And then you have nuclear is one of the safest source of energy, and the most powerful source of energy that we have at the moment. And it's also the one that is best for the environment. So it's more electricity for people, more space for nature, and we can all live happily.
Well, it's certainly a strong pitch. Do you think nuclear needs a rebrand? I had, Scott Galloway, a famous sort of podcaster, a professor. He went out with his 2022 predictions, saying that nuclear is going to be one of the hottest sort of investments for this year. But do you think nuclear needs a rebrand, or kind of obviously it does, but how should that happen? And are new generations sort of ready for this?
I mean, if you go back in history, I mean, we have done this before and we can do it again. Of course, you can always do things better and more efficient, and that's what's tech about. If you look about the investment, I mean, the problem is, I mean, you haven't missed this debate about the taxonomy in the EU, which is actually to give the financial ability to invest in nuclear. So we're really happy about the new decision in the EU.
And that happened just the other day, right? We should just mention what that is.
So the taxonomy is the European investment tool for investments to see. I mean, it's actually to calculate if it's a green source of investment. And everybody know that you won't get fundings if you don't have green investment. So it was really important to get the classification for nuclear, because it means that it's sustainable, and when it's sustainable, you can get funding. So,
and there was quite a lot of debate, but I know Sweden did not object to having nuclear as part of the taxonomy, right?
No. So we were pro the nuclear, which is amazing. But yeah, about the development of nuclear, of course, is that I mean, you see the small modular reactors, is people are talking about it, so that's also like the big buzz. And you have one part of the society says like, okay, that's in the future, that's not going to happen. And I mean, we're positive to see what's going to come out, and we also know that this is actually coming right now. I think there's like 10 different projects that are supposed to go live within the 2030 or around 2030. This is a big opportunity to see what's gonna come out of that, because that is that's making it possible to build smaller, safer, and sort of easier constructed industries. So you could place those near cities or nearing the industry, so you can be really sort of specific in putting energy where you need it, which is also a big possibility. And then, of course, I mean, the thing that takes time, people are always talking about that it takes too much time. We can't wait to build nuclear, but I think the mid average time of building nuclear is 7 years. If you look on the global scale, in Sweden, for example, we have the regulations that we cannot build more than altogether 10 reactors, and it's 20 years of decision making. And I truly believe that this is going to be one of the major changes for the development, like globally, because I mean, you cannot really deny the fact that we need energy not only in the Western world. We need to electrify pretty much all of the sources that today uses the fossil fuel.
Right.
Just you mentioned before how you only need like a really small space and you can get electricity to a lot of people. And I recently listened to a podcast, documentary about the Fukushima disaster. How it can come in like natural disaster that can be really hard to predict. So where in the world is it best to put these plants? Is it Scandinavia, because we were kind of I can't remember the last time we had a big natural disaster, or where is a good place to put these plants if they take up so small space and it still distributes so much energy? Do you know that?
Well, I think it's going to depend. I mean, some energy sources will definitely be better placed in other areas. Today, you put the nuclear reactors near water for cooling system. We will also see this new development in blykalla, or like the lead cooling system of reactors. So, I mean, I don't say like it's easy to put anywhere. I mean, of course, you will have to do a resource to see where to put them. But on the other hand, we also know that it's possible to put those small modular reactors on, for example, a ship. So anywhere where you have water, I mean, you can transport electricity. So of course, so maybe you wouldn't put it in the desert. But then on the other hand, if you look on around on a global scale, you can see desert-like areas building nuclear. So.
Oh, cool.
I'm not going to say like where it's best to build at the moment, but you see it's popping up pretty much all over the world.
Karolina, I think this is a fascinating topic, and I assume we're all on the same side of things here. But I would like to unpack one aspect of technology. So yes, technology solves a lot of problems, but technology is also a huge challenge. So there are, for example, the security elements. There are environmental elements. You know, the use of technology actually is harmful to nature as well, the energy consumption, etc. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, there are two sides of technology, right? So let's maybe start with the security element, because obviously that is a huge factor if we talk about nuclear energy. And you know, having nuclear plants on boats circulating, for me that sounds a bit risky. But you know, please unpack this from your end.
I'm not saying that each and every boat is going to have a nuclear reactor for sure. I mean, but the safety is interesting, and I mean, if you look back in time, where you started building the nuclear back in the 70s, of course, there wasn't enough research and science, and you build it different. Of course, no one wants a new Chernobyl, for example. But I would also say that today you have no other source of energy that is more actually scientifically researched. You have so many secure, I mean, there's so many different steps of security within the nuclear. For example, if there's a natural disaster, I mean, Fukushima is a great example. Actually, it was as you were mentioning, it was the natural disaster that created the harm. You don't have any. I think there is one cause of death due to the radiation, for example. But I would say that the Fukushima was a great example of that everything works in terms of security. Rather than saying that it wasn't secure.
No, but okay. So let me rephrase, because I'm pro nuclear energy. So let's make that clear, right? But there are obviously major risks, and especially with an increasing knowledge among also criminals, hackers. Terrorist groups. I mean, the more we kind of, let's say, connect society, the more risks there are also as a consequence of that, right? And I guess for a lay person in society, you know, there will always be at the back of their heads this element of risk. So one is to say, you know, well, there are no, let's say, natural disasters in the Nordics, you know, so we're safe. But then there's the other element. Well, yeah, but then there might be terrorists or other criminals, that would hack the system, and that could impose a threat, right? So I don't want to, let's say, bring this discussion to a lot of negativity, but I think it's relevant.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest threat to nuclear is fear. So of course, it's a very important question to raise. But if you look historically again and up to date, I mean, you have countries that have nuclear and they do not have nuclear weapons, because that's usually what people also think, that, oh, you can use the ways to build nuclear weapons. But then you have countries without nuclear, but they do have the weapons. So it's always going to be a threat, I guess. But you also, if you look on the new tech on nuclear, is also they're going to use a different kind of material than the uranium, for example, like thorium, or to also reuse the current waste matter. So you will change the composition of the waste, so to speak. So of course, I'm never going to say there is not a risk to anything. I mean, there's a risk to everything. We know that. But there's so many different kind of aspects with nuclear that we've been taken into consideration for a very long time. And now when we see The storage are being approved to keep the storage down in the ground, and people are thinking, well, it can't be safe there for 100,000 years. And I mean, my personal view of that is I hope not. I mean, hopefully we can dig that up and reuse it, so we don't have to get any new material. So we reuse, we reduce, and recycle. I mean, that's pretty much the take on everything. Not only plastic waste, but also the uranium waste. So.
Karolina, I want to move on because there are a few other topics I want to hear your take on. And just to give a little bit of a background, you started at Ekomodernisterna 5 months ago. I know you're soon launching a new podcast, but just in terms of how you guys work and how you influence the world around you, talk a little bit about how you do that, and then I want to get into asking about the cities before we end.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, as we started this pod, I mean, the tech possibilities is really a core of our organization, and I would describe us as like a new green movement, because look historically, of course, humans make impacts on nature. So, but that doesn't have to mean that all impact has to be negative, and it means that with new efficiency and new tech and new view on old problems, we can actually restore and make less impact, even though we're a growing population, growing cities, more energy usage and everything. So, so what we do is that we really try to put the scientific view on each and all problems. We don't want to get stuck in the formal views of thinking that people are problem and we're actually the cause of all the problems. We like to think that we're the solution. So human and tech in combination can actually be very good for the environment, if that makes sense.
No, sure. That's a great take on it, and I wish we had more time to go into all the work that you do, and there's definitely reason to have you back on to talk some of these subjects. There's just one just to give another example of your take on things. You have a strong view on cities, and in terms of having them be more, let's say car free or freedom of cars. Just give me your rundown on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that comes down to efficiency as well, because, I mean, the bigger population and the more people who lives in cities, the more actually space efficient we are, because people tend to live in smaller apartments, we live in taller buildings, which means that the buildings itself are made of less concrete. We use energy more efficiently. And if we move the people to the cities, then we don't really need the cars in the cities. So, because then usually the distances are enough to use public transportation. You can go by bike or walk. And here in Stockholm, for example, I mean, I go by boat every morning to work. So there's always other ways of commute to the city. And then I mean, from the boat, I just walk to my office. So by living in the cities, you can have a less impact. Actually, people tend to be more vegetarians, for example, in cities than if you live on the countryside, which is also good for the environment. And by, of course, going by public transportation, you use less fossil fuels, and by living closer to the cities, then you can also restore nature to nature. I mean, going back to the 18th or actually 700th century, then we had pretty much no forests in Europe because we were using wood for fires and making agriculture areas. But now when we can have more effective agriculture, we can let the woods stay as forests, and people live in the city. So it's actually very good for the environment to build tall buildings and live compact living in cities.
Wonderful. Let's get back there. We cover the mobility sector quite a lot, and it should be interesting to have your take on it. Just you are now launching your own podcast. When we talked the other day, you still hadn't had a name for it yet, but can you talk about what we will listen to in this podcast? What kind of conversations will you be having?
Yes, we will do this in different series. So the first 10 interviews will be on energy questions, everything from solar, wind, nuclear, but also how energy will be a part of the society, on in which sectors will energy be an important topic, where do we need it, how do we get it, and how to make the best of it. And then we will also have the next part of the pod will be on biodiversity, because I mean you can't really deny that even if we have the climate change, we also have the big loss of biodiversity, which is even in my world a bigger wave or a leap to cause a problem for this planet. So biodiversity will also be a big part. And then, of course, effective cities and other eco-modernist topics.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you, Karolina, for coming on the show. This has been the Scandinavian Mind podcast. As per usual, guys, what are you looking forward to in the week to come? Roland?
Well, two things. One is going to Åre, actually, skiing, so that's going to be nice. The second is, and I'm going to miss that, but I'm going to view it online. It's kind of gallery week, art week in Stockholm. There's a lot of new exhibitions coming up in Stockholm next week, so that's going to be exciting to follow by distance, unfortunately.
Erik?
The big news is obviously on Wednesday. Swedish restrictions all leaving, so looking forward to that. Let's see what happens on Thursday, how I feel. And also Stockholm Fashion Week, of course. It'd be cool to see if you can pop by somewhere.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of cheering going on at the Stockholm Fashion District, where they're happy doing the fashion fair with lifted restrictions. And this has been the Scandinavian Mind podcast. Don't forget to sign up to our newsletter not to miss out on any news or drops. Until next week. Goodbye, guys.
Take care. Stay safe.
Bye.